So we are here with Mike Cronin from the Gloucester Times, and we are talking about the Rockport Fire Department. Mike, can you just describe the makeup of the Rockport Fire Department, how it's organized?
The Rockport Fire Department is all volunteers. They all get a stipend of about $2,000 a year. I think it averages out like $35 a week. Most of them have full-time jobs. When I spoke with Captain Frank Favillaro, he said, most of them are, plumbers, electricians, things like that. They work 40 hours a week, and then part-time they cover the fire department whenever the hours allow them to. There's about 4 or 5 firefighters, 1 captain per company, and there's 4 companies.
Mike, do you want to tell us about the letter that the firefighters had sent to the town officials?
Yeah, so on Monday, a letter sent on behalf of the Rockport Fire Department mentioned that, they had issues with the leadership. Last summer, June 2019, Mark Schmink of the police department was chosen by Chief Horvath to serve as the Assistant Chief of Police and also serve as the Director of Emergency Services. This was a part of Town Administrator Mitch Vieira's reorganization plan. He said that, by creating these new positions and giving them to people who have already been working in the town, they would save money by, not having to hire outside, having to, give more benefits to somebody. So it's a pay raise with added work onto established town employees. According to the letter was written by Captain Frank Favillaro of the Rockport Pigeon Cove Fire Company. There's been complaints about Schmink's leadership since about earlier this year. They believe that Schmink has been taking away power from the chief, the fire chief, overstepping his boundaries. What Favillaro said was bullying the department. There's a list of grievances that they have. First, they say that they were frustrated with the hiring process. I guess that none of the people in the department were made aware that the position was being created. None of the volunteers had an opportunity to apply for the job. They allege that it was kind of just handed to Schmink, who apparently they claim has no firefighting experience. Going on from that, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, Schmink created a mask kind of initiative where he would get members of the police department to post up downtown and hand out masks to those in need. He also asked, the fire department to do so as well, apparently, according to the letter. Because the fire department, they're volunteers, they work full time. Some of them couldn't take on extra hours to, essentially do what they call a police detail. When I was talking to Favillaro, he said that, some just didn't show up for it. Around that time, that's when fire training, fire drills between the departments, that's when they stopped. There's kind of a lot of, he said, she said around this, but the fire department says that, they feel that it's retaliation from Schmink, who is not letting them drill because they wouldn't participate in the mask program that he organized. This all goes over the head of the fire chief. Usually the fire chief would organize the drills, but now Schmink made it so that they would have to, I guess, according to the letter, this is all according to the letter, file paperwork, and it needed to be approved by Schmink in order to start the drilling. This unnecessary, I guess what they call bureaucratic policies that that Schmink put on would kind of bog down, the chief's leadership abilities. They weren't allowed to, meet whenever they wanted. They had to make everything go through Schmink. And that was one of the issues that they had. The letter basically says that unless Schmink and the fire assistant chief, Stephen Abel Jr., are not removed by Friday at 6 p.m., the majority of the volunteer fire staff are going to walk on Friday, November 13th at 6 p.m. That's their deadline.
And this leads to almost like an emergency meeting amongst firefighters and town officials.
It was a closed door meeting between the captains of the Rockport Fire Department, town administrator Mitch Vieira, select woman Ruth George, regional human resource manager that also covers Hamilton and Manchester. Her name is Michelle Lee Carroll. They all met at town hall on Wednesday afternoon to discuss, the letter. Afterwards, Favolaro met out with me and some other reporters from other news agencies to discuss kind of what they talked about. According to Favolaro, training should start up again. They haven't received training or drill since early February, his company at least. He only could speak for his company. However, there's still no word on whether there's going to be any management changes in regards to Schmink and the fire assistant chief, Abel. So right now, it seems that we're kind of in this holding position, and there's no word on, whether the town has been, considering letting Schmink relieve Schmink of his duties or not. They've been pretty tight-lipped over this the past couple of days.
But they did put out a public statement.
Yes, they did.
Right?
Mm-hmm. They disagreed with how the fire department handled the situation with the letter, but they have heard their concerns and they are planning to work with them through it. And they say hopefully cooler heads will prevail. One of the things that they highlighted in the letter that, if worse comes to worse, the Gloucester Fire Department will be handling the town's fire services for the time being, starting Friday. There's been allegations going on among the fire department that this Schmink's kind of, I guess, what they would call heavy-handedness with the leadership. This is all kind of a ploy to kind of weed out the volunteer staff and possibly bring in a full-time staff, a new department that's helmed by him and Assistant Fire Chief Abel, I should say. In the public statement the town issued, they made it clear that this is not the case and that the Board of Selectmen are all in agreement that the way the fire department maintained now with its volunteer staff is the most ideal way for the town. And these claims are baseless, and they firmly deny that there's any plans to shift over to a more full-time staff. I plan on looking into more of the other chiefs' takes from the meeting. Hopefully get some town officials on the record as well, see what was discussed. Hopefully get a clearer picture of where everybody's at.
I wanted to start off by saying I know it's Veterans Day, and you guys have been doing a lot of programs, but we had something kind of special in the cricket that because it felt that we should probably do something different since everyone was doing something different this year. Manchester is massive. I think it's probably the biggest. I shouldn't even say it this way, but it really loves its military holidays here in Manchester. I mean, it's a big deal whenever we have it. So Veterans Day being sort of not celebrated this year because of COVID, that's a big deal. Mm. So what we ran instead was we went back into history and we went to the archive of the paper, and we found the first time that Veterans Day was ever celebrated. And it was introduced in the paper as this new holiday called Veterans Day. So I wanted to just share it with you quickly because it was very interesting. It's not the Veterans Day that we think of, because that really became a national holiday in the 30s, in the mid 30s. But in 1922, it's the first time it was called Veterans Day, a day to celebrate. And you want to know what was there to celebrate?
Let's have it.
It was actually for the Civil War, the Northern soldiers, the veterans of the Civil War. They were called the GAR Boys, which stands for the Grand Army of the Republic, which many people know. Those were people who fought for the Union. And in 1922, there were only 3 of them left that were living. And they had this day in the country, in the northern part of the country, I think, for this. And what was interesting about it, and it's a great article to read for any history buffs to sort of go back in time, called the Wayback Machine. But at the time, it said that this was, the idea of Veterans Day was to actually have it be both a day of a moment of humor and then also a moment of serious remembrance. So they almost viewed the holiday as something to give the boys some levity and a good time, as well as give them recognition for all of their service.
I'd like to get back to that somehow.
I know. Well, it is. I thought that was the most interesting part of it, actually, to think that there was, we think of that as being so serious, and it is a very serious, solemn, ceremony, the Veterans Day ceremony. But it is interesting to see. I mean, honestly, if I read this, it'll say the man who spoke, he was he was Dr. E.W. Homan of Saugus, was the speaker of the evening. And he had his audience with such funny storytelling. He kept his audience in a paroxysm of laughter for 20 minutes.
He'd be on Netflix today with that.
There you go. I mean,
they didn't have Netflix. They didn't have SNL.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Memes.
Yeah. I think that's the only time in my life I'll ever hear the word paroxysm.
We need to bring that word back.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
anyway.
And Erika, the other story we want to touch upon this week are the grocery angels, as I call them.
Oh, I like that.
See?
I love that.
Yep.
We're going to use that. I may use that for the online version of the story. Yeah, we did a piece last week. We went and visited a crew that has been, we called it the Giving Crew, but this crew of ladies, it was 5 ladies last Friday, but it's not just them. They happen to be there on Friday. Every other week, there's a crew that gets together at the Essex Council on Aging, or it's really the Senior Center on Pickering Street. And it was, Jody Woodman, Annie Cameron, Sarah Richards, Dawn Burnham. And they were getting together to put together almost 60, grocery kits that included a grocery card, but chicken, eggs, vegetables, juice, all sorts of things. And they do it, they started this as an emergency measure, an idea back in March for COVID. And lo and behold, they thought it would only be 3 months, and they're still at it, and there's no end in sight. They're looking at the winter season, and they're thinking they're going to be needed more than ever. But the story behind it is so interesting. It really got started by the Council on Aging in Essex. Their board of directors said, oh boy, this is going to be a time when seniors, especially those who are isolated, are going to be even more isolated and are going to need some help. They're going to be people on the edge. But almost entirely at the same time, and Annie Cameron, who's on the school committee, the way she said it was great. She said, listen, think about it. All 4 schools in our school district just suddenly closed. No warning, no nothing. They just closed the door and walked away. So the school officers, the nurses in particular, Joanne Seaman, Donna Smith, and then also Andrea Locke, the resource officer, the safety officer, they know who the families are and the kids are who are kind of on the edge. So you had the older seniors, but then you also had these families who were also going to be on the edge as well. So they started this thing, and now it's grown to the crew, or the angels, as you would say it. It's grown, and it includes this sort of silent, quiet, very interesting group of people. School committee people, ex-school committee people, people who are involved with this, the seniors, donors, and they've all now connected with the Open Door and Accord in Hamilton. So food pantries, and what it is this kind of informal but well-run charitable engine that's stepping in when they're needed. And I just thought it was a really great story. I also think what's interesting is they thought they were only going to be together for 3 months. Here we are 6 months later, and they think their biggest job is ahead of them.
Very cool stuff. Fascinating. Hey, folks, subscribe to The Cricket. You don't know what you're missing over there in Manchester and Essex. Great work, Erika. We'll check in with you next week.
Love seeing you guys.
Yeah, so over the Rocky Neck Art Colony in the Rocky Neck Avenue part of Gloucester, there had been a property, 37 Rocky Neck Avenue, had applied for 3 special permits because they had this goal to donate the art exhibit space down in their first floor to the Rocky Neck Art Colony. Now, if people know this property, they know the Getterman family, and they knew the late Judy and Gordon Getterman, and those 2 artists' impact here in the city just over time. Now, after they passed, their family wanted to commemorate and really memorialize their family members' impact on the city and their wonderful and award-winning art in the form of an art gallery down below, and wanted to create the space for the Rocky Neck Art Colony to bring in artists. As we all know, the Rocky Neck Art Colony has been a great platform for artists from all over to be able to come and enjoy this city and the landscapes and opportunities it has for them to continue their craft in different ways. But the question is housing, the question is space for gallery space and workspace. And so the Goodman family wanted to provide that for artists and thought that this would be a great opportunity. Now, this application for special permits came before the city council on Tuesday, and it kind of looked like it was all full steam ahead, but it actually got punted back to the Planning and Development Standing Committee for one more review for further vetting. And the move came after some of the city councilors were concerned that the request for special permits is based in part on preserving the gallery space for use by local artists and groups like Rocky Neck Art Colony. In the original application, they had said that this was going to go specifically to the art colony. And Joel Fafaza, the attorney, had kind of mentioned that they have every intention to give it to that organization, but just for the time being, in terms of, this is the question about special permits, if the Rocky Neck Art Colony were ever to say, we actually don't need the space anymore, or the building gets sold, stuff like that, what happens with the special permits, just to make sure that it doesn't become housing that this person then can, or just dwelling space that people can say, oh, I have a special permit so I can kind of get around zoning ordinances. So it's really to make sure that this remains space for artists in the long run, whether that's Rocky Neck Art Colony or not. And so he had put, they had changed the terminology just to kind of imply that this is going to remain space for artists. And so because of that change, the city council said that they would like to bring that back to planning and development just to have further discussion, as they would prefer to have that discussion in a standing committee rather than at city council. So they did hold a public hearing on Tuesday, and there were, number of us supporters, including those associated with the Rocky Neck Art Colony, abutters, neighbors, artists from this town and neighboring towns, all who were in support of it. And Joel Fafaza had been in communication with prior. And so it looks like there's a lot of backing for this, a lot of appreciation for the Gettleman family for wanting to do this. And so now it's all just to look back at planning and development and then see it come back to city council in a few weeks to see the discussion go forward.
Gotcha. And the other big story you're following now is the reinstatement of the Human Rights Commission in Gloucester.
Right. So people might know that there was a Human Rights Commission here in the city back in the 1990s, but over time it kind of became dismembered and kind of disappeared for a little bit of time. But Mayor Romeo Taken has really emphasized wanting to bring this commission back to the city, emphasizing its importance. In their first meeting on Monday, she emphasized that this is one of the most important commissions in her eyes in the city, just because it really creates a voice for the voiceless, and as they work to make the city an equitable place for all residents and people who come here in the city. And so the purpose of the Human Rights Commission, for people who aren't familiar with it, is to improve the life of citizens here in Gloucester by enlisting individuals in community-based programs and groups, educational programs, and campaigns to increase mutual respect, harmonious intergroup relations, and the peaceful enjoyment of life in their diverse community. And so it's a 7-person commission, and it has people from all different professions, walks of life, people who specialize in special education, immigrant services, homeless services, working with the Peace Corps in their past work, working with people who are learning English for the first time, looking to get a college degree, really trying to touch on all the bases here in the city and really try to continue that conversation, especially during such a year where there's been a lot of conversations both here and globally, just to how do we make our communities more equitable for all people. And so it's exciting to work. Again, their first meeting was on Monday, and they're gonna have one, I believe, every single month, once a month. And so there's gonna be an article coming your guys' way with just a little bit of a bio about each member of the commission and kind of what their goals are with the new Human Rights Commission.